tonight. So you're first going to hear from our economic development planner, Jason Mishnick, who will come up and go through some of the preceding studies that were done in order to identify the needs for this study. He will also go through a little bit of the history as to the RFP process and the various consultants that we talked to and why we're selecting the consultant that is before you tonight. The most exciting part of this is that we do have representatives from the team being selected for this project from Camiros, and we'll have 3 different representatives from that team that Camiros has put together for this project. They're going to go through specifically and talk about their experience in other communities that are very similar to DeKalb, including the fact that they've worked for other college towns and why their experience will be useful to the city of DeKalb moving forward on this project. We'll also hear some comments from our chiefs, our police chief and our fire chief, and as the mayor indicated, from NIU. So at this point, I would like to ask Jason Mishnick, our economic development planner, to come up and go through a little bit of the history on this project.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to kick this off and inform you as well as the public the background of how we have arrived to this evening. I think that this is a very important conversation that we're about to partake in, especially for the community as a whole. Looking at the Annie Glidden North Corridor, this all began in 2013 when the City of DeKalb and Northern Illinois Center for Governmental Studies did the first phase of a 2-part study that looked at the housing throughout the community. At the end of that, the second phase looked at specific neighborhoods. There's a total of 24 neighborhoods that they looked at and created the individual profiles for those neighborhoods. The neighborhoods that are part of the Annie Glidden North revitalization plan here are neighborhoods 1, 2, and 3. And through the housing study, there was some unique characteristics that were identified in terms of those neighborhoods. And I'd like to share a couple of those with you. These 3 neighborhoods represent the highest population and density for the city and the highest percentage of rental housing. Of that rental housing, the area accounts for more than 1/2 of all subsidized dwelling units in the community. It also accounts for 29% of the housing choice vouchers that are used in the community as well. It has the lowest median age, and it also has the lowest median income. It had the highest volume of exterior property maintenance issues, and it also accounts for more than half of the city's quality of life and personal safety threats. In addition to that, it also has very low access to commercial services, including being identified as what is considered a food desert. And for those that are unfamiliar with the term food desert, a food desert is defined by the USDA as an area where there's a population of more than 500 people living in a distance greater than 1 mile from a grocery store where they have access to nutritional foods. Looking at the density and the low income, one thing that has been found and through years and decades of research is that high concentrations of low income and poverty do not lead to a high quality of life. And the purpose of us looking to do this project and work with a consultant is to help develop a strategy to develop and improve the quality of life for those living in these neighborhoods. So to go through these neighborhoods, neighborhood 1, they're on the map. That's it, this one?
Or the map that was before.
Oh, sorry. There we go, thank you. Neighborhood 1 is the area known as Eden's Garden. It is a income subsidized duplex as well as single family detached homes. Neighborhood 2 is the area that is west of Annie Glidden, there on the south. This is predominantly student housing, and then area 3 is the area between Lucinda and then just north of Dresser there on the east side of Annie Glidden. Historically, the area known as neighborhood 3 was built out as student housing and housing for faculty of Northern Illinois University. As time went on and development occurred west of Annie Glidden, students and their consumer preferences changed, and there was a migration of students to west of Annie Glidden. That created a unique situation with a very affordable housing and vacancies of the rental units in that neighborhood. And we have heard that over time that neighborhood has began to transition and has started to backfill with a lot of families, especially low-income families that are transplants from Cook County and other urban cores. There's also a human factor at play, and when we talk about those that are coming out to DeKalb, they are coming out here for a specific reason. They are looking for an improved quality of life compared to the opportunities that they have. DeKalb has a rich history of services, being able to provide services, and the question that we need to ask now is, have we passed over a precipice where that area, which was not originally planned for families, is that creating this situation? And what can we do to improve the quality of life and service delivery for the residents in those neighborhoods? In June 2016, the city released a request for proposal for consulting services to conduct what's called a sub-area plan for this neighborhood, with the goals of stabilizing the neighborhood, identifying economic development opportunities through commercial businesses, jobs, services, and increasing the overall tax base. We also wanted to identify strategies for joining residents to service providers, decrease crime, address property code issues, and build a positive reputation for the Annie Glidden North neighborhoods. The overall project goals and the intent of the AGN plan is to develop action items to make the area become a desirable, walkable, safe, and economically vibrant place to live. The revitalization of AGN is critical to the well-being of neighborhood residents, NIU students, and DeKalb as a whole. And the question that we need to answer is, what is the strategy, and how do we get there, and what do we need to do in order to improve the quality of life for those that have chosen to make DeKalb their home? How to improve the reputation of the neighborhood so that individuals want to live in it. And frankly, as staff, this is outside of our expertise. This is not a unique situation to DeKalb. There are other communities in the country that have situations where they have large clusters of dense poverty, and rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we have an opportunity to consult with experts in this field. And at that time, I would like to introduce Adam Rosa from Camiros, who is the consultant whose proposal we have ultimately chosen to recommend.
Thank you very much. I hate being called an expert. I think all the experts are out here in the room. We're just here to actually work with the folks that live in the community. So thank you very much, Mayor and City Council members. We're really excited to be here. It's been a bit of a process from when we first came here about a year ago, and we had our first interview with staff and talking about the issues and the challenges and the assets of this community. So I think we're getting the presentation on board here, but just to introduce myself, my name is Adam Rosa. I'm a principal with Camiros Limited. We're an urban planning firm based in Chicago, and we focus primarily on 2 or 3 things. The first is community revitalization strategies. The second is looking at regulatory and zoning changes to communities to make them a better place. And then the third is really quality of life planning. So going beyond the bricks and mortar of traditional neighborhood plans to think about economic development, to think about job creation, safety, walkability, all these different factors that go into making your neighborhood a good place to live. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background on who we are and why we were originally selected by the city to work with you all on this project. So we have a pretty extensive experience in college town communities. And college towns have a unique set of circumstances that I'm sure everyone here recognizes. You have the longtime homeowners and the community members that have been here for a while. And then you have the student population, which can be pretty transient, coming in, and there's a kind of a bump throughout the year is when the town is really active with people and when it's kind of quieted down. So we've been working in a number of different communities nationwide on issues in and around college campuses and trying to make them a better place to live. And it's really about the balance of what's going on in these communities. So for example, we've worked around Notre Dame University, recently in Alabama and Birmingham next to UAB, which was a project that was looking at improving a college town neighborhood, but also at the center of it, revitalizing a large public housing site and making it a better place to live for folks that had generations in the community in this neighborhood. So the project that we've been working on most recently in Bowling Green, Ohio, it started about a year ago. And Bowling Green's a town of kind of similar characteristics of DeKalb. It's about 30,000 people. The university is anywhere between 20,000 and 25,000 students. It sits about 45 minutes outside of Toledo, if you know the Toledo area. So there's a lot of similarities there. And when we began this project, the community was really wrestling with the conflicts between the students and the longtime homeowners. And then the city really wanted to provide a direction as to how do we redevelop some of these areas around campus and really seek to revitalize parts of this community, which included both residential and commercial uses. So we've been working in Bowling Green over the last 10 or 11 months to create this plan, which is called the Community Action Plan. I think this is a really good model for what we want to do here in DeKalb in terms of a revitalization plan. So it's an action-oriented approach. We're not here to just create a broad vision and then walk away and say, all right, now go implement it. We want to create a planning strategy that is built on actions and built on smaller improvements that can get us to a larger goal. So for example, in Bowling Green, we looked at some of the quality of life issues of students, and not even just students, but residents partying, residents leaving trash in their front yards, residents making noise, and how that affected the neighborhood. On one hand, that was kind of the reactive approaches. The proactive approaches were, well, we know we have a need for high quality housing in this neighborhood, and where should it go? What should it look like? And what types of services and benefits can be brought along with this housing to improve the neighborhood? So the other thing that we do a lot is really quality of life planning. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been lucky enough to work with communities nationwide through the HUD Choice Neighborhoods program. And that is HUD's place-based initiative to revitalize communities. So we've worked on 5 different choice neighborhood plans. Right now we're currently working in Brownsville, Texas. And at the heart of those choice plans is the revitalization of aging and distressed public housing at the center of a larger community improvement effort. And it's really a grassroots project and a grassroots approach that we bring to this type of work. We did a choice neighborhood plan on the west side of Rockford, Illinois, about 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm really proud of it because so many projects and so many improvements have been implemented through that plan. Everything from new streetscape to new housing to economic development and job programs to small things like a walking school bus that helps kids get to school. So those are the types of, that's the type of approach that we bring to this type of planning work. So I'm going to quickly introduce Place Consulting and Kimberly Bear, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her role on the team. And Kimberly is a market and economic development expert. Kimberly.
Thanks, Adam. Good evening. As Adam said, my name is Kimberly Bears with Place Consulting. And so we're pleased to be a partner with Camiros on this project. We'll be completing the market study component of the project. And you can see some of the experience that we've had. We also have done a bit of town gown planning, if you will. Loyola University in Chicago, in Rogers Park and Edgewater, DePaul University, University of Chicago, are some of the universities and neighborhoods in which we have worked. So also bringing that sensitivity to the varying needs of different constituencies. So what does a business need to succeed? It can't succeed on just a student population. So how do you do business development and business attraction in a way that meets the needs of both the residents and the student population? And oftentimes we see that there is a disconnect between a particular business, the way in which they might be marketing, the products and services that they're offering. As Adam mentioned, we too are very focused on implementation, and that's why we think we make such a great team. One of the projects that we did in Lakeview, the Lakeview Area Master Plan, was done. We completed our work 5 or 6 years ago, and they're actually continuing to implement the work that we identified in the plan. So we're very focused on creating actionable implementation plans that are real. For both Camiros and Place Consulting, one of the best things that we can see is when our plans continue to live and breathe and evolve. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Adam, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you, Kimberly. So everything we do is based on community engagement. We're here as not so much experts, but we're here to facilitate the dialogue between different stakeholders. And we're here to also bring best practices and our expertise and our knowledge of some of these issues to the conversation. So some of the engagement techniques we're going to be using in this process, of course, online engagement. So having a means on the city's website for people to learn about the meeting. How do I become part of this project? How do I make my voice heard? We're going to be conducting key person interviews with different agencies and different potential partners that can help implement this plan, to learn about the community and to really soak up the information of all the people that have been working so hard to make this a great place to live. We'll be developing a smaller task force, which will really be a working group made up of stakeholders, residents, partners, potentially council members. And that'll be kind of our sounding board for ideas before we bring them to the larger community. We'll be conducting 4 large community meetings where people will have a chance to give feedback and to really represent their ideas about the future of the neighborhood. Landlord engagement, I think, is something that we want to really promote through this project, and something we've been working very hard on in Bowling Green, which has a lot of probably the same issues of absentee landlords in some cases, local landlords that keep up their properties really well, and just the whole range between one side to the other side. So getting them to the table and making sure that their voices are heard. And then just last but not least, engaging the students in this project. Not only just to bring them in to ask them their ideas, but looking at ways that they can be actively involved in the creation of this strategy and this plan. In Bowling Green, we have 2 or 3 students that are represented on our task force. So they're at all of the meetings alongside planning commissioners, city councilmen, representatives from the local university, et cetera. So that's the type of approach that we want to bring to this, to really bring you all into this process and to learn from you about what's going to really work here in the community. We have a unique opportunity here to collaborate with NIU. And we've developed a relationship through our proposal with the Center for Governmental Studies, where they're going to augment some of our expertise and some of our approach to this project. So going out and helping us collect data, giving us feedback on different proposals, working with us on the stakeholder interviews and the key person interviews, helping out with the market study to go and really work with the local business community. So that's one piece of it. But we also think that there's other ways that we can bring NIU into this process and really enrich the entire neighborhood and think about how we can really build off of student learning opportunities as well. One thing that we really like to stress in our work is not just thinking about the long term, but thinking about early action projects that we can implement while we're doing this planning. So this is going to be about a year-long plan. And it's important to get people involved and to build momentum, to really get some smaller wins, some low-hanging fruit that we can start to implement. And for example, in Bowling Green, the community came up with a range of 10 different ideas that could be potential early action projects at our first community meeting. And that's everything from a neighborhood cleanup day to murals and public artwork to a recycling day to a new community garden in the neighborhood. We took all of these ideas, and at the second community meeting, everyone in the audience had a chance to vote on the one that they wanted to see carried out. So the two that actually got the most votes and that tied were a better block approach, a better block party, which I'll tell you a little bit more of, and then a code enforcement handout, which is more of a technical report of, I have this problem with the property or this problem in my neighborhood. Who do I call? Who do I contact? And how long does it take to remedy that problem? So we completed both of those early action projects along the way of creating this larger neighborhood plan. And the Court Street Connects project was that first better block party idea that came from the community. So we knew we wanted to create a stronger connection between the campus, the neighborhood, and the downtown area. And one of the ways we wanted to do it was to test out a bicycle lane. So Bowling Green had been wrestling for years as to, should we put in bike lanes? Should we not? Where should they go? How are they going to affect parking? And so we wanted to put in a demonstration lane as part of this event. So that was really the primary element. But along the way, we created this entire festival around that project that had everything from live music to dog adoptions to kids making, students making furniture and selling it to support the local park. It was a fantastic event. And it all came through by our committee that we put together for this project. So this helped to build momentum for people to support the plan and to carry out additional projects. So this is something we have in our approach here for DeKalb. It may not be this specific type of project, but we want to get ideas from the council and from the public about what can we do in the next 6 to 9 months to get the ball rolling towards greater improvements. So we talked a little bit about the boundaries in the neighborhood context. I think we have an interesting characteristics here because we have a lot of multifamily housing of all different ages. We have the Annie Glidden corridor that runs right up the middle that could really be supported by additional commercial uses and potentially even mixed uses that can really help to form the main street of this community and of this neighborhood. And then we really need to think about stitching it all together. Because when we go out and travel through these neighborhoods, they aren't really connected. You have to go out and you have to get back onto Annie Glidden to get to the next one. And making it easier for people to get around is going to be part of the strategy. All right, so we talked a lot about community engagement. Now I wanted to engage the council in a quick little voting exercise. So let's see here, I gotta pull it up on this one. This is going to be on this screen down here. So the original RFP identified 5 major goals of the revitalization plan from the city's perspective. So we want you all to have a chance to look at these 5 goals and tell us which you think is the highest priority. So number 1 would be address code violations. Number 2 would be economic development. Number 3 is branding and identity in the neighborhood. Number 4 is improving safety. And number 5 is overall neighborhood stability. So this is the type of exercise that we'll be running through with the larger community members at our community meetings. But I wanted to give you a flavor and really get some feedback from council as to what they think is the most important direction. So I'm going to click this little button on the right-hand corner. There'll be 30 seconds to count down, and you can vote using 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on those little keypads, and then we'll see in real time what the results are. All right? Let's see if we can get this going.
Adam?
Yes.
I'm going to interject here.
Absolutely.
As the mayor, and the council can certainly do what they want to as individual members. I'm going to refuse to get involved in this exercise right now. I think it's premature for me as your mayor, as members of the city council perhaps, to make a judgment on this before we hear more input.
Sure.
So I respect your exercise, and I would invite other city council members to to play along, if you will, with this,
Okay.
I am not going to do that.
Okay. Well, we respect that as well. Thank you very much. Okay, so there's 30 seconds counting down here. You can pick 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You can vote as many times as you want, but the last vote is the one that counts. And I guarantee that the Russians will not be interfering in this voting in any way. You guys clicking? Oh, I don't think anybody's doing it. Okay, we got 1. 3. This is just going to give you a flavor of some of the tools that we use in our engagement. All right, so of the council members that voted, 80% said neighborhood stability should be the main goal of this project and of this plan. 20% said improving safety was the primary goal of this revitalization plan. Okay? Oh, sorry, clicked it too soon. So we have one more question here. All right. So in terms of needed improvements in the Annie Glidden Road neighborhood, do you think the most needed improvement overall is number 1, transportation and parking, number 2, parks and public spaces, number 3, housing stock, number 4, streetscape and urban design, or number 5, additional social services? Okay, so 30 seconds to select what you think should be the highest priority for us as we begin this planning process. All right, we got 5 respondents in there. 6. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and click it. All right, so 33% of those polled said the housing stock should be the critical improvement. 33% said social services. 17% said the streetscape. And then 17% said parks and public spaces. Does anybody who voted for housing stock or social services want to give us a little bit of feedback as to why they voted that way? And it's okay if you don't. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. All right. Oh.
No, of course, it's
Yes,
always
ma'am.
me. Yeah. I saw that as one of the more comprehensive issues, and it's also something that has come up in terms of University Village. So it seemed to me if that was addressed appropriately, it would touch on some of those other pieces.
And you're
as well.
talking specifically about the social service?
Mhm.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is how we use some of our voting techniques, where we'll get the feedback and then we'll have a dialogue with people as to why they voted the way they did or why they didn't vote the way they did. And it helps to really get the conversation going. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the main presentation here and talk a little bit about our process and our approach. So we see this as a year-long planning process, and the first part is really the issues and opportunities, which could really begin in August and September. And this is for us to learn more about the community, to have those key person interviews, to meet with different partners and agencies, and to really get up to speed on what are really the critical assets to build upon, what are some of the challenges we need to address. So then the second part of this process is the visioning. So thinking really broadly about where we want to see the neighborhood go in the future, whether it's 15 or 20 years down the road, establishing that vision, that benchmark for where we want to take it. That would be in September of this year, we would begin that. And the beauty of starting in September is we have the students back in town and we can bring them in and really work with them as well in the visioning process. The third part is the goals, objectives, and strategies. So once you have the vision outlined, thinking about the specific strategies and projects to get us to where we want to go. And I always say that you're better off with a plan that has 7 or 8 really great projects that you can implement rather than 30 to 40 projects where you may not have a lead agency that really wants to do it. So we're going to work really hard on identifying what those 7 or 8 projects are with the help of the community. and then figure out how to make it happen. And that's the beauty of having some of the expertise that we have here on our team, is to really think about, okay, we have this idea, how do we bring it forward, how do we make it happen? What partners here in the community can help to really carry this forward? So this all comes together in really the first draft of the plan would happen around January. And then the revisions would happen throughout the spring and summer next year, and having a final plan completed about this time in 2018, in July. And all along the way, we have two other pieces. The creating community connections is bringing the different partners to the table and the different stakeholders and learning about what everyone's doing and connecting the dots and creating a stronger approach in that way. The other is the doing while planning, which are some of those early action projects that we think we can really undertake throughout this year to build momentum and to really promote the plan. The main deliverables, or the key elements that we're going to produce in this project, is the first is a zoning review memorandum, which I think is really important to look at how you can promote new development that works in the right way with the community. We want to really be able to identify the red flags in your zoning, both from the technical approach and the processes. And we have zoning expertise on our team that can really help to make that all come together. The second is the issues and opportunities memorandum, where we take all the feedback about the challenges and the assets and the issues, and we put it together in a way that people can really understand it and get their head around it and start to make decisions. We're going to be doing a community survey, both of residents and business owners, to really start our market study part of the project. So learning from the folks that live in the community about what their needs are. The market study, Kimberly will tell you a little bit more about that, but that is going to help to justify some of the recommendations of new housing. What type of housing? Where should commercial development go? What other services are needed in the community? And then we'll have the draft report, the draft plan, which will be available to the public for review and comment. And then the final plan report, which I said would probably happen around July of 2018 if everything keeps chugging along. So just going around the community, I just have a few more slides. I wanted to just share a few of our observations of the Annie Glidden Road corridor and the surrounding neighborhoods. So some of the opportunities and challenges you have, looking at the parking ratios and looking at how parking works within the neighborhood, especially in these large apartment complexes. We know that students are moving away from owning their own cars. A lot of people are moving away from owning their own cars. So do we need all the parking when we build new development in these areas? The walkability, you can see the sidewalk here on Annie Glidden on the right side. How do we make that a more pleasant experience for folks, especially handicapped folks and people that may have a little bit more trouble getting around? We don't have shade trees there. We don't have anything that really tells us where we are in terms of signage or street lights. And, so that's the type of thing that we can recommend in this project. Looking at some quality of life issues. So here we have some trash. We have some couch out in the front lawn of one of the homes in the area. So how do we deal with these issues, and what processes can we strengthen through this plan to deal with some of these kind of smaller quality of life issues? And then things like the sidewalks and where people park, looking at the zoning and how that works to create a nicer neighborhood environment. So the fence that we have here along the sidewalk, people that park in their front lawns, and we see this in a lot of college towns. That's always a big issue. So what can we do to help remedy some of those challenges? And on the commercial side, we have some retailers there, like liquor stores and potentially some more marginal uses that may need to be transformed in the future or may need to be revitalized. So looking at what we can do to promote the right kind of development that the community wants to see in some of these areas. And then opportunities closer to the campus, the Greek housing, which I believe is going to be consolidated in another area. So what happens to this property where the Greek homes are today? And what can we do to promote the type of housing or redevelopment that we want to see here? And then looking at particular catalytic and transformative sites, and I'm going to bring Kimberly back up to talk a little bit about this. but really focusing on what sites have the greatest redevelopment potential, both from commercial and residential side, and thinking about how we can make that happen. So Kimberly, do you want to give some of your impressions of maybe this site in particular? And then I have a couple more slides that talk about your process in Loyola.
Sure, thanks, Adam. This was a particularly kind of fun site for us to take a look at. There's a lot that could be done with this particular site. It frankly could be completely redeveloped for essentially better land use and situation. However, if you were going to keep the site as is, there are several different things that we would do. The bike parking is located down the ramp. The outdoor seating area has no umbrellas, no shade. Adam was talking about that for the sidewalks, but there are some very simple fixes that could be done here to make this much more kind of user-friendly and attractive. When we were there, we saw some of the signage falling down. We saw old sale signs that were ripped and falling. So again, some smaller changes, or frankly, just kind of a wholesale change for the way in which the building is purposed. It almost has a 1960s California style with the two, I see a couple of you smiling, you've had these thoughts perhaps. So this was one particular site that we thought was especially ripe for some change. And as Adam said, this represents the kind of work that we'll be doing. So I hope that what you're taking from our presentation is that this is not a study, this is a plan, it's an action plan. And Place's background, I didn't talk much about this, but Place's background really is in the trenches. I spent 20 years in affordable housing, community organizing, and economic development, working in community settings and doing this kind of work, and then have shifted over to the consultancy side. So the kind of sensitivity to community dynamics and understanding what can be done and what needs to be done is something that Place, I think, especially brings to the team and to this project. We also, as Adam was talking about, we drove through and saw some of the vacant sites, some of the abandoned sites, some of the underperforming sites, and that will absolutely be part of what we look at. So the economic development component, in addition to the housing, weaving together and integrating both those sides of the same coin so that we're creating a vibrant, integrated community. Oh. Yeah, thanks. Yes, so in terms of the market feasibility study, Adam talked about the foundational aspect of that. So we'll be looking at, so one of the programs that we use is Esri GIS. I'm sure that the city uses it as well. There is demographic and psychographic information that is found there. It's developed from the US Census and then projected out from that for financial markets, household income, population growth, density, et cetera. So that'll really be the foundation that we use to understand who's in the community and where the community is projected to go in the future. And looking at those sites that I talked about and identifying, given who's here and who may be coming here, what the best uses for those sites are. So both in terms of real estate development, but also in terms of use. So what kinds of businesses are missing? We did a fascinating study in Chicago and looked at 3 different communities, Andersonville, Wicker Park, Bucktown, and Boys Town, and looked at the differences between those 3 neighborhoods in terms of business mix, diversity, and vibrancy. And going through the old-fashioned way with a clipboard and marking down what kind of business is there, what kind of building condition is present, and then comparing and contrasting. And so that's the kind of eye that we'll bring to this work as well. This is a slide that shows the project methodology that we used in a study with Loyola University, and we would bring the same kind of process here with this project. So Adam's talked about outreach. So we've got the business owner outreach here, obviously, intercept surveys, and working with NIU and the student population to understand from both the student and the community and business population what it is they're looking for and what kinds of needs are going unmet, frankly. And then dovetailing that with the demographic data that we'll be pulling from Esri and market segmentation. So that's the process. We don't believe in letting people come to us, so one of the things that we did, especially here with Loyola University, is we went out to the community. So we identified the specific community segments that we wanted to interact with, parents of young children, the LGBT community, the student population, the homeowner residential community, et cetera. And for that project, we broke out where those communities might be found in terms of institutions or businesses. And we took our clipboards and surveys to those places. So we were at a farmer's market one Sunday. We were at an ice cream shop on a Thursday night, for example, getting community feedback. And I think we're back to you. Terrific.
Thank you. So I just have a couple more here to go. So I talked a little bit about the zoning piece of this, and we call that really the reactive approach to the plan. We have the proactive of where new development should go, what public improvements should happen, but we also need to look at the regulatory framework that's here today. And this gives you a little bit of a flavor of some of the things we would look at from the parking, which could be really an effective tool to regulate student housing and multifamily development. Considering additional multifamily zones with different density ranges. So you don't just have a single family and then a high density, but something that really helps to promote townhomes or medium density development. Stronger design and siting standards. Thinking about clearer use definitions in your ordinance. Standards for single family to multifamily residential conversions that we know happen around college communities. And additional parking landscape and screening standards that could help deal with some of those challenges that I showed earlier. So lastly, I just wanted to leave you with a couple images from Notre Dame. We worked on a plan for Notre Dame, I think it was around 2000, 2002, and we developed a neighborhood strategy working with the city, the university, the local stakeholders of how we wanted to see this area develop. And they wanted to really create a walkable Main Street environment with a range of different types of housing, but to really create a place where people could hang out and almost a downtown near the campus. So this was from, I think, 2007. This was the street looking away from the south side of Notre Dame campus. And if you go there today, this is what you see. So there's mixed use development. There's a range of different housing types. This is really the highest density, but as you go a block in, there's townhomes, there's single family, there's a new hotel that's being built. So this is really what the city wanted to promote and what the university wanted to promote, and our plan helped to really make this happen. So we hope to bring some of this expertise to the DeKalb community to work with folks here. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm sure there will be many. And I know we also are going to have questions from the community, but I'll let you kind of facilitate that. Thank you.
I think, Joellen, what we're going to do is to have a couple of the other presentations, and then we're going to let the city council have any questions to anybody, and then we want the public, obviously, in those comments. On that line, if you are in the audience and you'd like to speak tonight, please fill out a speaker request form. Those blank forms are back in the lobby. We're taking those. I've got those in order, and those folks will be asked to speak in that order. Joellen?
Thank you, and thank you to Camiros for making that presentation. That's a lot of information to hear and understand. It's intended to give you a flavor of what a professional team can do coming into the community. Obviously, they haven't met with us. They don't know specifically what our examples are, our issues are. I think part of what we hope to do is provide you with the breadth of their experience and the types of tools they can bring to the table to help the community gain consensus, because We know there are a number of issues in the community, and one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we gain consensus on those issues. I've heard a number of people from the community approach staff and various elected officials about why can't we do this ourselves, that we know what the issues are. And everybody that says that to me and I ask them, what's your issue, usually gives me somewhat of a different issue. So again, I think we need to have them there. We need to have this dialogue, to do those exercises like Adam showed in a group where we can kind of flesh out what some of those real issues in our community in Annie Glidden North are. From that, then we can establish a vision. So we're gonna look at the issues, we're gonna establish a vision for the community, and then from that, their expertise will really come in handy with implementing strategies that address our specific visions. Before we get into some of the questions, one of the other things that I've heard, again, why do we need a study? And why don't we just spend that money approaching issues that will address crime or the other specific issues that people believe are relevant in the area? I would like both of our chiefs, our police chief and our fire chief, to come up because I think one of the things I've heard, especially from our police chief, is that we really need to focus on the root causes, that you can't just throw some lights on the street or implement certain specific public works projects that are intended to reduce crime and expect that to be successful. We really need to get to those root issues. Our fire chief, Eric Hicks, will also address some of the needs that we determined as at the beginning of this study that were the result of some of the health issues that he's going to talk about and provide us with some data. So I'm going to ask both of them to give a brief description of that before we move on.
Good evening, everyone. Council, consultants, community, maybe most importantly, community here tonight. I'm probably the last guy to come to the podium and ask to do something briefly, so I'll apologize in advance for that. You know, I have a fistful of data here, and I don't know that a fistful of data is going to be how we begin to process this problem and try to come to some type of consensus or solution. What I can tell you minimally in regard to the data is this neighborhood is the highest demand for police services anywhere in our community. The community, for policing purposes, is divided into 3 beats or zones, and within one of those zones there's a sub-beat that divides it into 2. That sub-beat where it's divided into 2 is basically a large portion of neighborhood 3. When I look at calls for service, you know, we're tracking right now to be at about 25,000 calls for service in that neighborhood alone. That's a pretty substantial number in a community this size. But I think what's most important is to look at this maybe from the data will tell you one thing. The data is clear. There's a crime problem in the neighborhood. There's a safety concern. But there's a lot of other things going on there. I look at, trying to deliver this message is a little bit awkward for me, and I'll tell you the reason why. Because I feel very strongly about the condition of the neighborhood. So when I look at what causes crime, you know, if I had the answer to that, I'd probably be an award-winning sociologist with a bunch of books under my name and be making all kinds of money, and as you can see, I'm not that. But I think it's pretty simple. And I'm not an expert at really anything. But I think if we open our eyes, we can tell what's going on in that neighborhood. In my travels and speaking with other university chiefs or other communities that host universities, their chiefs of their police departments, the story is always the same. What we face in this neighborhood is a huge rental property surplus at this time. That rental property surplus is really contingent on a wide variety of factors, but the primary factor is the state of the university. In Illinois, the state universities with the university police department, or the university communities, their respective police agencies, are all in agreement. We all believe as chiefs in this profession, that rental property surplus creates the next factor that's really concerning for us, which is neighborhood destabilization. When I look at neighborhood destabilization in regard to the big crime picture, it's really one of the key aspects or components. So what does neighborhood destabilization mean? It really means simply that this is a neighborhood that was designed for students. Its focus was students. And now, because of a large rental surplus, it's transitioned into something else. It's transitioned to the home for a variety of folks, individuals, families, non-students of all types, people of some means and people of virtually no means. So when you look at how the neighborhood's set up from a family perspective, and I always use the example that I grew up poor, but I had a good mom. I look at it from the perspective of a lot of these folks are just trying to get by. And they're in the neighborhood not because they have their heart set on committing crime, but it's the best rent per square foot that they could find to house their family. So they choose to house their family in a neighborhood that has virtually no services. It has virtually none of the resources that other neighborhoods have. It has a tremendous amount of poverty, a very dense population, a lack of opportunity, and that kind of leads to one of the other things that I look at. You know, it puts people in desperate situations. When people are placed in desperate situations, they will act in a desperate manner. You know, I know that when I was a young man, my father did some things that were not in tune with the law. And as such, he probably could have gotten in all kinds of big trouble. And I have to admit, I did some things that were not in tune with the law as well. But when I look back, there were times he was in desperate situations. And he made choices. So now when I look at crime, I really look at crime as just a symptom of all this. So when you look at the police, and that's where the buck stops. That's where this council will hold me accountable. That's where the city manager will hold me accountable. Say, Chief, why aren't you doing something about crime? So I can say, without question, there is a multitude of measures going on in regard to crime and safety that we can do from the police perspective. From proactive policing strategies, intelligence-driven policing, community-oriented policing, problem-oriented policing, putting cops on dots, co-policing, which we have a very strong relationship with our university police department, which, by the way, is kind of an abnormal situation in state university communities. So I thank the university for that, Chief Phillips, and the NIU administration. There's one caveat within that where we have learned to force multiply and to do it in a positive way by working together. There's a theme coming along here. I'm sure it's probably, you're wondering where it's at, but it's on its way. So when we look at how police address crime, we can look at enforcement options. We can look at unconventional policing strategies, from school resource officers to resident officer programs to community engagement programs. Like in our community, we've done Camp Power and Power Up. We're looking at a program to introduce in regard to the opium epidemic called Project Hope, heroin outreach, prevention, and education. There's all kinds of programming, but we're only addressing symptoms. If we don't change the paradigm on how we approach this from a discipline perspective, things are not going to change. We're going to be in a situation where we can keep, and I say this almost wanting to bite my tongue clean through, we do need more police officers. But at the end of the day, we can't police ourselves out of this problem. And if you want some demonstrated behavior to address that, take a look around. Chicago is going up in flames because it's been an unaddressed problem for decades. So if we don't look at how we problem solve this, we're in trouble. So what I say is the typical response within government agencies and within the community too is the siloed approach. We look at problems and we look at them from only the perspective of our respective disciplines. So public health will look at it from a health concern. The police will look at it from a crime or public safety concern. Fire will look at it from, again, a public safety concern, but from a different slant. We all have our niches. And I'm not saying we're not good at it. We all have them. But the silo effect really means to me that we're all out there doing our job, and we're not really working together. This is a community approach and a potential win or a guaranteed failure without it. We can't carry the ball alone. We can't, I'll be in trouble for this. We can't rely on a consultant to tell us what to do, but we can rely on them to give us the guidance on where to go and how to bring it together. If we bring things to the table that this council has to make decisions on, and we only pull fragments of information in from one discipline, you're going to inevitably make some good decisions and as well make bad decisions. So when I look at this project, we better start looking at symptoms of the problem on a larger scale. We have some assets here, we have some resources. We can tell countless times of examples of where we think we work together but we really don't. Where we think we have a solution and we really don't. Where we contemplate we're doing the right thing and we really don't. And I'll give you an example. You can collect all the data you want at an ice cream parlor. You're not going to touch the core group in this community. You can collect all the data you want by going to a farmer's market. You're not going to touch the people in the neighborhood that need this, because they don't have the money to go to an ice cream parlor. They don't have the money to go to the farmer's market. You better be digging into the neighborhood. No offense. That's only one strategy. Understood. Understood. So let's address the end game. And I told you this was going to be long, so I apologize, Mayor and Council. Let's address the end game. If you want to hear statistics, we can talk about it all day. Our police officers in this community respond to more calls per service annually than bigger cities, some triple our size, like Aurora, Elgin, and Joliet. More calls per service annually per officer. Last year, we had a significant increase in violent crime. We're doing better this year, but I'm holding my breath. If we don't bail out of the silos and come together, it's not just about the city, it's not about community organization X, Y, or Z, it's not about the university, it's about this community. If we don't bring that together, this will all be an effort in futility. But where we have the option of succeeding is going, from my perspective, looking at demonstrated behavior, and I say this all the time. Bring to the table somebody who can guide us, who can demonstrate that they've had success, and we've got a chance. Roll the dice and we don't. I think I better leave it at that. Thank you.
Amen, Chief.
Very well said, Chief Lowry. I'm going to talk about some, I'm going to throw a little data out there about the fire department. Last year, the fire department responded to 5,584 incidents throughout the city. In the northwest quadrant, accounted for 2,361 of those. So that's almost half the incidents in the smallest response area we have in the city. If I can switch to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about 3 different neighborhoods. Oops. First, I'm going to talk about neighborhood 1. Neighborhood 1, as far as the fire department, has somewhat stabilized over the last 5 years. We've seen a slight decrease in responses on both fire and EMS calls. Most of the EMS calls in that quadrant are attributed to a few addresses. Normally, they'll get a few people in there that can't care for themselves real well, and then Actually, I think we've had 10 or 15 to one address alone in that quadrant this year. Neighborhood 2, for example, also a slight decrease. Fires are way down from 2012. We had 8 fires in 2012 we had 25 fires. This last year we had 12. So fires throughout the city are overall down throughout the city. So they're about 4% down throughout the whole city. As far as EMS calls, one of the biggest thing we're seeing in EMS calls is in the other line. And the other line are people that can't care for themselves, people that should have some kind of assisted living or somebody that should be in a nursing home, but they now can't afford to do that. We're seeing a lot of elderly, a lot of older people in these types of facilities, in apartments that we go to there sometime daily to lift assist or some help for them. On neighborhood 3, this is where we have our biggest problem, and most of those things you can are accounted for, like what the chief said. We've seen a 35% increase over the last 5 years in our call load. Most of those, the people there need assistance, like the chief said. They have no transportation. They have no means to get to a medical facility. There is no clinic in a walkable area. It's something, like I said, you've heard me say this before, we are the first line of medical care for them. They need some kind of clinic in that area for them to get to. Okay, what this is a graph of neighborhood 3. There was 908 calls in neighborhood 3. 621 of those calls were emergency medical calls, and 262 of those calls were other. And like I say, what the other is, for example, that people can't care for themselves but have no other means to go to a facility. So in the end, the city ends up taking care of them, or the fire department. There was an address in neighborhood 3, for example, that we went to over 100 times last year. We were unable to place them in a long-term care facility, but there's also nowhere for them to go. So it ended up being put on the fire department to take care of them. I believe Shelley could probably talk to that when she talks about that some. So, in the end, they need help. They need these kind of services added to them in that north side town.
Chief, he asked for the boundaries of the streets.
The boundaries are basically Lucinda on the south, Normal on the east, and Annie Glidden on the west.
Russell Road running up the street.
Correct.
And then the north boundary is the...
Just north of, yes.
You guys talked about a subzone in that zone. What is that subzone? You had to me that zone is almost like 2 zones, not just one.
Yeah, so for us, this is a police thing.
Okay.
So how we do deploy resources based on demand for services. So we call that area, that general neighborhood, is our zone 1, everybody else in the world zone 3. But it's divided into 2, one east and one west. So the zone 1 east would be the zone that would be east of Annie Glidden, go up to Dresser, primarily down to Crane, but could almost always extend down to Lucinda, and then over to Normal Road, but generally along the Russell Road, then to Normal. Got me so far? That's 1 east. 1 west is primarily everything west of Annie Glidden, in that Echo Park, Fotis, that northern end area. Aspen Court, all the way up in that area. Does that make sense? Okay.
So in closing, like I say, I'll echo what the chief said. We all need to work together to get a plan to help the residents of the north side out.
Thank you, Chief Lowry and Chief Hicks. Joe Ellen, would you introduce our next guests?
Thank you. Yes, thank you to both of our chiefs. The message that they delivered is very important in helping us understand how this study will directly impact our residents of our community. As Jason mentioned at the very beginning of his presentation, this study started with an effort in a collaboration with Northern Illinois University on a housing study. Throughout this entire process, we have continued to work with and keep Northern Illinois University informed and engaged in the process. At this time, I would like to introduce Vice President Ann Kaplan to come up and say a few words about their role and positions on the study.
Thank you. Good evening. That's a hard act to follow. I'm here as a representative of the university, also as a representative of my own division, which has a lot to do with interaction with outside stakeholders, and particularly tonight as a spokesperson for President Freeman, who fully intended to be herself, who cares a lot about this issue, but is instead at a funeral in Waterman for a member of her staff. So you have a letter from President Freeman in your packet. I know she would emphasize the points in that letter if she were here. I can easily do that for her because, in fact, those are the points I would make myself. And I think those are the points that any representative of NIU would express in relationship to this project and the university's interest in it. You've heard that we have about 8,000 NIU students who live in the Annie Glidden North neighborhood. That includes the dorms off Lucinda, the many apartments both east and west of Glidden, and the Greek houses to the east of Glidden. And you've heard, and you've probably noticed, that the look and feel of that neighborhood is not particularly inviting. There are, as the police chief has said, no grocery stores, no parks, very little green space, no schools or clinics, very poor lighting, and then, of course, this very high rate of service calls from the police and the fire department. So at a time when NIU is working very hard to recruit students and convince them that DeKalb is a great town, this neighborhood makes that proposition a much harder sell than it should be. The division I oversee includes the Center for Governmental Studies. That unit has participated in a great many community studies that assess the quality of life issues, and we've heard a lot about those issues in the Annie Glidden North Corridor. On a personal level, I've been at NIU now for more than 40 years. When I came here as a new employee, I lived in Amber Manor. My daughter attended Roberts Elementary School even after we moved to a house on the other side of town. So I've watched the changes in that neighborhood. I know it's been an area of concern for at least the last 3 university administrations, and I'm very hopeful, as are we all, that this project can help turn it around. And I think the relationship with the university police have established with the city police is just an example of how much better we can do when we work together on these kinds of projects. And I think having a consulting team that is used to working on relationships between universities and their host cities is a step very much in the right direction. So we are entirely in favor of this. We hope you will support it, and fast.
Thank you, Ann. Jo Ellen, do you have some closing comments?
I do. I'll keep it brief because I know we want to hear from the community. Again, one of the things I think that we want to emphasize is, again, what are the benefits of this study? We've heard a lot about how it will be conducted, what we will learn. Why do we need a study? I think there's 3 main reasons I'd like to lay out to the council and the community before we turn it over and open it up for questions. One of the aspects that we will likely gain from the visions identified in the study is that we need to rearrange the community. We need to have different land uses in different locations. We may need to take housing out of one area and put it into another. We may need to create commercial opportunities in things that are currently residential or vice versa. And in order to do that, we're going to need to rezone property, a process we're all very familiar with. One of the requirements for rezoning a property is having a proper plan in place. Our existing comprehensive plan is not equipped to handle the rezonings that I think are going to come out of the study that's going to be created by the consulting team. So again, this becomes the legal basis for any rezonings that might occur in the future. Something else that's going to be very important, and I've talked to several community members about this, is that when we get the results from this study, oftentimes it leads to recommendations or strategies that are going to allow us to ask for grants or look to other programs. If those grants are competitive, the very first thing that many of those applications say is, what community engagement do you have, what plans are in place that support what you're asking for. If we can provide them with a plan that clearly articulates the community's desires and the plans for that area, our score on that grant when we're competing with other communities or other applicants goes up. So that's the second reason that's very important. One of the other very important aspects I expect to receive from the marketing analysis for economic development purposes is that our economic development planner is already very actively talking to developers who have ideas in the area. Again, they have no direction. We don't know how to steer them. Our downtown has a very clear plan, and we know how to direct development in that area. We don't have a plan in this area. Kimberly talked a little bit about placemaking and image and identity. The document will provide us with something that we can provide to these developers and say, here's our vision, here's our plan. Now, please come to our community and invest in the plan that the community has put together. So again, I think those are the three main reasons I think it's very important to have this type of plan in place. So with that, I really would think it's an appropriate time to let the community ask their questions and hear what the council's questions are as well.
Okay. If the council agrees, I think we'll open it up to public comment, and then we'll follow up and we'll get last chance. Okay. Again, just a reminder, if you're here tonight and you would like to speak, please fill out a speaker request form. Those are in the back. Give those to our city clerk, Sue Herman. We have about 5 or 6 people who have filled out, and we'll take those in order of receipt here. First of all, I'd like to read 2 written communiques that I got this afternoon. One came in at 3:40, and I'd like to read this letter from Herb Katz, K-A-T-Z. Jury, following a phone call, I sent an email today to Aaron Stevens regarding the Annie Glidden North study. As an owner of 8 acres, now vacant, zoned for business and annexed, located on Annie Glidden Road at Twombly Road, I am in support of this study. Because I received no prior notice, I am unable to attend the meeting scheduled for tonight. Please enter this email at tonight's meeting. I am supportive of this study if outstanding issues would be addressed and corresponding practical solutions could be found. Thanks, Herb Katz. Shortly after, another communique, this from Phil Young, who is the president of the DeKalb Park District. Hi, Jerry. I wanted to briefly comment on the Annie Glidden North Corridor Study Project that will be discussed at your meeting tonight. This was just brought to my attention this week that this proposal was going forward. 3 of our parks fall within the proposed study area. I wanted to let you know that since the board has not yet met to discuss this subject matter, that we do not have a consensus one way or another at this time on this corridor study. Regards, Phil Young, President, DeKalb Park District. Now, what I'd like to ask, thank you, Sue. Do we have another one?
You're welcome. That's the last one.
Okay. I'm going to take these in the order that they were received. I'd ask the folks to come up to the podium. I have your first name. Please identify yourself again and give us your address. The first is Brian Morsch. Brian?
Good evening, Council. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you. It's a new council, so you know, very, very pleased to be here. I'm once again Brian Morsch, 404 South 3rd Street. One of the main facilitators for DARA. I served on the task force, the city task force, and everything I've ever done for the city, I want you to know that it's been for the greater good of this community. So tonight is no exception. My main reason I'm here tonight is to shift the focus. I am not pleased with this, the idea of this consultants and the idea of the promoting this project. I'm here to shift more like the idea of what the police chief here had to talk about, and I commend him for the fabulous speech and the ideology of what he stands for. We've had a good communication through Dara and privately as well, and he's an amazing individual in terms of being able to execute a good plan. So what I'd like to do is shift from the Andy Glidden corridor to the idea of crime, poverty, and taxes, but for the whole city, not just this neighborhood. I understand that this neighborhood is in dire need of help, but the city's in dire need and the citizens are in dire need of help in terms of safety in this community. Some of you might know during the election I made it clear that my house was robbed, broken into and robbed. It took them about less than a minute to get into my house. I don't want to get too deep into it, but it was the 29th of December, 2014, shortly after Christmas, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My wife was home when it happened, and thank God they never met. The criminal, there were two of them, and I'm blessed to the idea that they never went face to face. I see just recently in my neighborhood, 2 weeks ago, there was some form of maybe, I don't know if it was strong arm or what you call it, but some kind of confrontation between a resident, a public member and a criminal element. That particular incident was on I believe it was a Tuesday, 11 o'clock at night, and that happened to be 3 blocks away from my house. The following morning, about 11 o'clock, there was an additional incident that was also 2 blocks from my house. The year of 2017, my alley seems to be a right-of-way for crime. Cars breaking in. There's been at least 4 incidences that we know of. However, my understanding is just recently, well, a month ago, there was an element of car break-ins, and I understand that there was some satisfaction due to the fact that this guy smoked a particular kind of cigarettes, Turkish cigarettes. And supposedly he says that's what solved the case. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it sure sounds good. So shifting to the bigger picture, once again, I would be very satisfied if we can focus on crime throughout the city, and we're probably not ever going to solve all the crime, but mitigate the hell out of it. And I know Chief is the right guy to get this done. I would rather see consultants for crime than this project here. I would rather see that money applied towards the bigger picture. I think most people in the city of DeKalb either has been a victim of crime or knows somebody that has. I'm out and about in the community a lot through being a landlord. I talk to a lot of people, and I get a lot of feedback in terms of what their pulse is in terms of the crime. And the last week or so, since I knew this was coming up, I made a mention to many people about it, and the results have come back in a fashion where, yes, that would be a better look at focusing on the crime. We can always talk about the poverty and the tax problems later. quite honestly, I think we're just north of crisis mode here. With regards to the crime report that Gene Lowry had out there 3 or 4 months ago, he presented to the council. I think that should represent a good wake-up call to, you know, basically the council, staff, and the community. And then I was happy to be present last night when the bond rating person was here, and we got the clear picture of what the bond rating is as well. You know, it sums it up. It's bleak. So, you know, from a standpoint of borrowing money towards this project, I don't see how that's going to happen. So, with regards to conversation with Mr. Lowry and his public comments, he has said crime is beyond a policing problem in this community, and I believe he alluded to that somewhat tonight. That gives good reason for a study for crime, or, you know, at least let's learn about what's available to us. Let's maybe a task force along with consultants. Let's get some experts in here where we can actually focus on fixing this problem. We all know we're in trouble here. You know, we can, you know, the perception thing is always on the table too, but we're living this. This is real. He also said he would take all the help he could get, which, you know, we're here. The public wants this to go away. The public's here to help him. And then last night, one of the things that he made mention of was one of the most important elements to crime-free housing was actually the communication element. So, in my opinion, the public wants this more than they need this. I think this is great. I think it should be tabled. And at some point when we can afford it and we have the bigger problems fixed, we could go forward.
Okay. Try to wrap it up now, Brian.
Yes, sir.
You've gone over 5 minutes.
One quickie here. I suggest we table the Annie-Glidden corridor study and transition to a much bigger picture of all of the community's safety, not just the Annie-Glidden area. We need to hire a consultant for the study of crime and poverty, not the Annie-Glidden corridor project. We could also benefit from a reasonable-minded independent citizens task force. There are a lot of floating ideas around out there. This commitment should also include all community stakeholders. You know, okay, let's see here. If we, if we choose not to participate in this process of fixing the crime, it's not out of the question that a private group could emerge to help work on this. And, you know, I think that would be disingenuous because it really is the city's problem, but the citizens are here to help. I asked the council to put up a solid meaning to hashtag Proudly DeKalb and be able to back it up. Support the citywide crime mitigation issue over the Annie-Glidden corridor project. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Again, we would urge subsequent speakers to try to keep it to 5 minutes or less, if you could. Our next speaker is Will Heinisch. William? Will? Thank you. Thanks, Will. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I want to start out by first, I met Carl Leone in the hallway coming up here and try and redeem myself a little bit. I said, Carl, I congratulated you 4 to 5 times last night. He said, yeah, you did, but you chopped me off at the legs at the end. And I said, well, that wasn't my intention by any means because we have a great relationship. So I just wanted to be clear to pull myself out of the fire that I still support Carl. I still support the crime-free, or the police incident reporting of crime-free housing and the great communication that has, as well as registration and landlord classes. My intention is not to get rid of that crime-free incident reporting. I handed you out a sheet there. I'm going to delete some of the stuff that's always been reported. I actually think the city had a bug in my office when I wrote this because I have some of the same terms that they used. So, and along with Brian Morsch. But my first point is I think we should be looking at the bigger picture here. Do we really need another study? I've been printing out all the studies over the years, from the governmental studies to the KTG study to the strategic plan. So we have plans, we have studies, we have volumes of these things. And I want to go, are we treating the symptom or are we going after the root cause? And I think there's a challenge here of ideas of what the root cause or symptoms, and are we just putting cosmetics over this and trying to improve, or are we really going after the main groups? Some of the symptoms and things that I think we need to try and change, we can do just through community input. The root causes I think we can do as well, and some of the root causes, the main three I feel are poverty, low-income residents, 2, crime, and 3, taxes, which have been mentioned tonight. In regards to poverty and low-income housing, you know, here if you want to go into a serious study, 3M brought in approximately 1,100 jobs a couple years ago. 90% of those people, the 1,100 people they brought in, I've been told, live outside DeKalb County. Why couldn't we have those citizens live, or what's the reason why they weren't able to hire people from in the city of DeKalb if 90% of that 1,100 are coming from outside? We need accountability in the school system. We don't need to continue to be an enabler of failed policies and support systems. And then again, overall, I feel Section 8 housing vouchers have not increased over the years and really are not the problem here. Moving on to crime, it is, I think, a result of number one, of poverty and low income, and possibly should be the number one focus. Number 3, taxes are killing DeKalb. There's a false logic out there that raising assessed value does not solve the problem of lowering the mill rate or tax rate. When rental property owners, commercial property owners, or homeowners are paying up to 45% of their payment or income towards taxes, it lowers value. It does not matter what the mill or tax rate is. Moving on, I have a concern with NIU as being a proposed partner in this study. Can NIU governmental studies be a non-biased in evaluating themselves for the North Annie Glenn corridor? Can NIU identify issues, programs, grants, fundings, and policies that NIU has implemented that has caused part of this problem? I know NIU did the housing project, and they stated that they had a terrible time communicating with landlords to get information, so I completely agreed with that 100%. And felt for their pain. But then when they did the strategic plan, if everybody remembers, we had all the meetings all over the city of DeKalb, and I called and pushed landlords to go to bleed their heart out to business owners, to residents, to get people out there. Because I said this is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I was very disappointed when the strategic plan came out. And the reason being is, and I quote on page 7 of the strategic plan, participants in all of the community conversations were assured that any ideas falling outside the purview of the city would be shared with the appropriate entity. And that's the important data that was lost in all those community conversations. It was not shared, and people were very disheartened. The groups I talked to, when they did the whiteboard, there was as many positives as there was many negatives. And this strategic plan came out, and it's really viewed through rose-colored glasses, in my opinion. So I suggest, in conclusion, that we already have the answers in all of these studies and more studies that are sitting around, laying around, and we have the information from the residents. Let's focus on the bigger picture. Let's focus on crime. Let's focus on the whole community. The other concern is all studies have a hidden agenda or strategic plans. Where's the big one in this? Where's the money? Is this for a new proposed TIF district? Is this for federal grants for more of the same, which we don't need? But where's the money? Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next, Joe Mitchell. Hello, Joe.
How are you, Mayor?
What?
Joseph Mitchell, 360 Long Valley Lane, DeKalb, Illinois. I humbly serve as pastor of New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, which is in the North Annie-Glidden area. Been a resident of DeKalb for 32 of my 42 years of life, and I was extremely humbled to be invited to the stakeholders meeting on last week. Let's be honest. What's being proposed is a major undertaking, and quite frankly, it's long overdue. Still, I'm glad that this important topic is on the table and being discussed. As a city council, we cannot allow this to become a race or a class issue. We have to approach this opportunity from a humanistic perspective. The measure has to be the improvement of lives and the living conditions of residents of DeKalb. Had a professor in seminary that always said, take the time to learn from other people's mistakes. We are watching a level of violence in the city of Chicago that is heart-wrenching. While there is plenty of blame to go around, part of the problem goes back to Mayor Richard M. Daley, the city council, and their ineffective answer to low-income housing and poverty. In the 1950s, housing was intentionally used to segregate. It was concentrated in food deserts. It had little green space and offered restrictive access to jobs in the area. Over 60 years later, they are still dealing with the consequences of not effectively engaging the issue. That's the exact scenario that's manifesting itself right now in the North Annie-Glidden area. Let's address it sooner rather than later. I believe Chief Lowry already said it, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. Adding more police to the area does not fix the problem. It just addresses symptoms. To address the root issues, solutions have to be talked about: adequate housing, transportation, green spaces, access to quality food, education, jobs, and resources. Now is the time to address this. James Rosenbaum is a sociology professor at Northwestern University. He has done extensive work in this area. All of his research has concluded if you improve the lives of people's living conditions, their lives will change. When individual lives are changed, it has a communal effect on the whole area. New Hope as a church has a short-term plan in the next 5 years, God willing, to build and invest in the North Annie-Glidden area by constructing a community center on the land that we already own. We are compelled to provide a graded resource to the surrounding community around the church to enrich the lives of adults and children. What we understand is just a start, and it's not enough. But if our investment is accompanied by an investment from this city, there's no doubt in my mind we will see transformation happen in that area. As some of my congregation is here tonight, we stand and support the study of revitalization. And let me make that clear: revitalization, not gentrification. Revitalization of the North Annie-Glidden area. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Our next speaker is Maurice Bailey. Maurice?
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
I've been here in DeKalb since 1993. I first moved in at Amber Manor as well. Amber Manor, places like that, the village were not meant for permanent housing. I felt like it was meant just as a layover into something greater, into a new way of living. We talk about quality of life. We talk about neighborhood stability, improving safety. I feel like those two go together hand in hand. Once again, neighborhood stability and improving safety. We talk about crime as if it's some sort of a disease when it's self-induced, I believe. I'm a non-traditional student at Northern Illinois University, so I kind of sort of represent both community and Northern University. We talk about words like communiversity, we talk about words like diversity, but we don't exercise it. When I heard about the Annie Glidden North project, I had jumped on the opportunity. I'm also a member of the Human Relations Commission here for the city of DeKalb. And I'm real passionate about it because this is my city, it's my home. I purchased a home in the Knoll subdivision in 2004. When we closed on the house, exactly to the date of closing, 4 months later, Mr. Jim Mason broke ground behind my house. I had a beautiful view of the cars driving back and forth from my backyard deck. I had a 2-tier deck, and I could see the cars riding up and down Annie Glidden Road. That was short-lived. As soon as Jim Mason broke ground, he started building townhomes. It started out in Annie Glidden, and it worked its way back. I said, Lord, don't let him get that close to my house. Because I knew he was bringing college students into a community where homeowners live, where children walk the streets, where dogs run about in the backyard. Sooner or later, I had a patio, a deck, leaning over my backyard fence. And then shortly after that, that's when the parties began. Every morning, Saturday, Sunday, I would go out in my backyard and pick up beer cans and beer bottles. It's too much. It's too close. We got single families trying to raise their kids, and then we got college students, and they're locked together hand in hand. When I came out here in '93, DeKalb wasn't what it is right now. There weren't that many boarded up houses. Downtown DeKalb did not look like this. This was before Walmart. This was when Kmart was out here, Dominex, Eagle. It was so lively. We had Starbucks, we had Starbusters, we had Amnesias. The college kids, they had something to do. Now they have nothing to do. I'm not condoning drinking or whatever, but kids are gonna be kids. We talk about the statistics in the paper as far as the DUI fatalities and things like that, but human beings, we as adults, we still have to be held accountable to a certain degree without being monitored by the government and being told how we need to raise our kids. And our kids are just running amok right now. I see kids walking up and down Annie Glidden Road. Their parents are not with them. I just recently found out that there's a third liquor store on Hillcrest. Do we need that many liquor stores over there? We don't have any grocery stores. We don't have fresh produce for the kids. All these kids that are living in University Village. I'm a transplant of Chicago. I grew up on the south side, Roseland District, West Pullman. I made it out. I met with the police department when Detective Tim Moore was still working for DeKalb Police Department. Hinckley, Rockford, Genoa, Kingston, Kirkland, all the chiefs came out and listened to me speak because I saw a transition that was happening back in '93 with the gangs and with the drugs coming out here in DeKalb. The cornfields went away, the subdivisions came into DeKalb. DeKalb is not what it used to be, but it still can be what it used to be. It's a mixture of three different people. We have liberals, we have conservatives, and we have students out here in DeKalb, and we have to coexist. We've been handed a great responsibility by having people coming here from Chicago because there's an overflow. Chicago has poured out, and now we get those people that are no longer accepted or want to find a better, it's a little bit of both. They've either been eradicated from the city or they're trying to find a different way of life. I applaud Joe Mitchell Pastor Joe Mitchell on just bringing up the fact that we need a community center in this area to raise our kids, to teach our kids, and to help parents parent their kids, because like I tell my son all the time, you cannot handle life. We have a whole bunch of adults out here that cannot handle life. And there's an old saying, it takes a village to raise one child. And if we come together as a community and we stop being about ourselves and stop being the self-centered individuals that we become in today's society, we can help raise that one child, and then another child, and then another child. And we don't have to worry about what are we going to do about crime, because these children have been raised with morals, values, beliefs that are going to make them become something great in this world that we live in.
Thank you, Maurice. Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I can wrap it up, Mayor.
Okay.
Annie Glidden North is a good idea. We need fresh produce out here. We could use a community center out here instead of just having people running amok and all these kids out here running amok. I want to thank you all, conservatives and liberals, for letting me speak this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. I'd ask our speakers to be respectful of one another, and we have to be careful not to get too personal as we relate our stories. Our next speaker is Jim Mason. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Council, and everybody here. I said on my radio show last week I'd like as many people to be here as possible, and this is great. People are afraid. I talk to people all the time. They call me and tell me things I don't want to hear. I've been here for 53 years. I've seen DeKalb grow from 10,000 students to 22,500 back to 13,000 or 14,000 students. So we're in a changing times. We're in a very changing times. I've got so many points here. I'm going to try to stay within 5 minutes. I'm off script here. You can't solve this problem without jobs. You can't warehouse people. You can have the nicest buildings in the world, but if people don't have something to do, they're going to get in trouble. Drugs. I met with a task force. Dara met with a task force, Will, about 3 or 4 years ago, and 2 officers came, and DeKalb is the epicenter for drugs. Chicago, Aurora, Elgin, Rockford, and they had this wonderful crop of people that had money that could buy drugs. Well, it's stuck. The chief fights it all the time. Drugs. No matter how nice the buildings are, drugs will take over. I agree with some of the other speakers that crime is why people are afraid. And that has to be solved first, because a landlord cannot rent his property on a commercial basis or a multifamily basis or a single family basis if they're getting robbed all the time. Doesn't work. I think I like the idea of your plan, but not until we solve the problem. You have to have a market. I have commercial property in town. You can't give it away. Not for $1 a square foot. I was listening to Dave Ramsey one time, national radio, how to make money, how to save money, how to pay off your bills. guy got on the radio and he said, well, I know where this has happened. The town has got the problems we do. He says, where's that? It's DeKalb, Illinois. He said, what do I do? And Dave Ramsey said, leave quietly. That's what we have here. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave. The more free stuff we have, the more people you have. If you're going to give away food, housing, medical care, you get more people. If Chicago's melting down, we're going to be the beneficiary of that. Come see, come south. Our problem now is we have interlopers in our schools. The school board is working right now. Some people, we're going to have to vet our schools like all the other school districts, because I think we have 3,000 or 4,000 kids in our schools that aren't qualified, and they bring friends like you wouldn't believe. One more time. When a bus pulls up and is supposed to pick up 3 kids, and 30 kids get on the bus, what are you going to do? That means the bus has to take those kids to the school, and the kids that are supposed to be down the line picked up, they have to be late to school for the next bus to come. The vetting process, I would say, hold off on your program. Let's see if we can get our schools under control and create a need for that area like we had 40 years ago. As I said, I've been here 53 years, and I used to go around there. Nobody whined and complained because there was no food stores. Nobody ever complained about anything. In fact, people would go there because it was the place to be. But now that Northern has shrunk 50%, the state of Illinois is bankrupt, and the city of DeKalb is actually bankrupt because of unfunded mandates, we do have issues. I would suggest the following. Finish the vetting program and find out how many people are really illegal here. I don't know if we need more cops, but I would like to see a substation out there at the Black Hawk and Hillcrest, right where you folks are being. Big thing we need is drones. The police can't chase everybody. Drones. Fox News the other night had 400 police departments in the United States are using drones instead of chasing people around, and this would intimidate people from being, let's say, nefarious. I'm gonna wrap this up. I'd like to see the more funding for the police, because I know they're working overtime. They're not complaining. The chief gives them awards here once a year, and I almost cry to hear some of the stories they have to go through. We need jobs, we need manufacturing. The only way we're going to get it here is we have to have a town that people want to be in. In closing, technology. Technology for the police department, the fire department, cameras in the streets, and the private people. I know one gentleman in here, he's collared 10 people in 10 different situations because the cops used his cameras. So in closing, let's vet the schools if we can. I don't have the votes, but I hope we get the votes. We have to vet the schools because it's state law. Anybody that knows that a student is illegal or does not qualify because of one reason or another, whoever knows that is committing a Class C misdemeanor. And anybody that signs up a student serially, for one reason or another, it becomes a felony. This is big business. It's cost, in my opinion, $30 to $40 million a year in students that we can't pay for.
Can you wrap it up, Jim?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Our next speaker for tonight is Kevin Kedzler. Did I pronounce that correctly? Kedzler.
Hi, my name's Kevin Kedzior. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but here I am speaking. I went to school at Northern from '87 to '92. I do not live in DeKalb, but I have a business in DeKalb, which brings me here regularly. And it's related to Greek student housing. And we're talking about silos, different categories of interest. And Greek student housing is one that's hasn't really been talked about much. I was concerned about this topic of relocating Greek student housing. That's news to me. My business partner and I have attracted a number of different investors to purchase Greek student housing and to revitalize Greek student housing. And that's where our focus is. If you take a look at the math, there are currently 18 fraternity and sorority houses in the neighborhood. And the average occupancy is about 35 beds. So if you do the math, 18 times 35 is 635 students. That's a really large group of people. And their needs are, they're concerned about crime, they're concerned about safety, they're concerned about things to do in the neighborhood. And the housing stock is aging. The university is making investments in new dorms and in remodeling existing dorms to make them more relevant. The same thing needs to happen with Greek student housing. I believe that if the city could create an environment where investors could come in and invest in those kinds of buildings, existing buildings, and in new buildings, you could easily bring $10 million from outside the community into the community and help revitalize Greek student housing. My fraternity is currently undergoing that right now. We actually bought the building for less money than the money that we're putting into it. We bought a building for $315,000 and we're putting over $350,000 into that building. And you've got 635 students living in these 18 buildings, but what's more is you have Greek alumni that have an affinity for the university and DeKalb, and they would like to see their organizations thrive. They would like to see more fire life safety. They would like to see more relevant buildings that students really want to live in. If you take a look at other universities around the country that have nice Greek systems, nice buildings that people want to live in, it really is part of the image and the focus of a university. It's the most obvious indication of student life at a university is when you take a look at Greek life. And our housing is not great. So those are all things that I want to make sure that if the city moves forward with the consulting, that there are people on the task force, pardon me, that would be able to work alongside the consultants in the city to make sure that that neighborhood is redeveloped for the Greek students that are there. I appreciate the chief's comments. Crime does come from desperate people committing desperate acts. And I appreciate the pastor's comments from New Hope Church. And in my closing comment, I think I'm going to take the air out of the room and say something that no one else may be willing to say. And that is when it comes to neighborhood stabilization, when it comes to crime, it doesn't take a village to raise a child. That's a lot of nonsense in my opinion. It takes a two-parent family to raise a child. It takes a mother and a father. And the biggest challenge that we have in our culture is fatherlessness. It's fatherlessness. And churches can address that. That's a difficult thing for government to address, but that's something that we all need to work towards in our communities. Fatherlessness creates desperation in families. And children need a mother and a father that love them and provide discipline and accountability, education, etc. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Next is Tom Phillips. Good evening, Chief.
How you doing, Mayor? I will be very brief with my words, but as I sat here tonight, I came to support my colleagues from NIU and also my colleague and friend, Chief Lowry. I will not be as eloquent and passionate as him. He's the chief's chief, and when he speaks, people listen. But I wanted to offer a little bit of perspective in my experience, not only from my personal life, but my professional life of having witnessed something very similar like this happen in two of my previous communities. I don't usually like talking about myself, but I think to add perspective to some of the community members that do not know me, I'd like them to know a little bit about me and where I come from. Because when people see the book, they typically they have a different perception of who I am and where I came from, typically from a position of privilege, a buzzword that's floating around lately. I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan, grew up in a single-parent household in a predominantly African-American community. I was homeless twice before I was 18, did not have a good relationship with the police, and got my first job at 10, did a little bit of the bad stuff too as a teenager, and my salvation was the United States Army. I escaped poverty by escaping poverty, by leaving, and I never looked back. So I offer that to give a perspective on my personal life and how passionate I am about safety. Not only safety for where I work, but safety for my children who also live in this community. After the military, I went into law enforcement, fell into it, never wanted to be a police officer, ended up working at University of Illinois at Chicago on the west side. As a university police officer, we did everything that Chicago police did. We patrolled the same neighborhoods, very similar to what we do in our co-policing in DeKalb, which made it very organic to me when I came out to this community. I witnessed something truly amazing while I was there. Several of the high-rise projects that we used to patrol came down under the second Mayor Daley. There was some good and bad to that. The bad were that many of the residents were displaced all over Illinois, including DeKalb, some out of state. But I watched also some gentrification take place, but they also, part of the initiative there, it was a public-private partnership, was to revitalize what they called the row houses and provide affordable housing. What they did was take what already existed in some of the worst housing I've ever seen. In the military, I was stationed in South America, and I've seen poverty, extreme poverty, and I've seen the exact same thing on the west side of Chicago. But they took that housing stock and they replenished it and renewed it, and they provide affordable housing while they offered economic opportunities around the campus and in the community. They did gentrify. What they did was, before they revitalized, they stabilized. They made sure that there were some of the things that Chief Lowry talked about, some of the social services that were available. That's critical. And I'll touch on that briefly when I talk about when I came here. Over a 5-year period, that entire community changed. And it diversified even more than you would expect. It was a diverse community with Pilsen to the south, a largely Hispanic community, a large African-American community, and diverse university environment. But it also brought in much needed money into that community. If you go down there today, it's almost like a Disneyland of Chicago. It has provided jobs. There's big box stores and clubs and restaurants, and it's just a totally different environment. It went from Maxwell Street, where there was a robbery every night. We knew it, we could predict it, and we'd be there, and it still happened. They still have crime, and they still have issues, but what they've offered is economic opportunity for the residents there, which includes some of the original residents. So I applaud your effort at what you're doing here. After I left there, I worked briefly at the University of Chicago. And while I was leaving UIC when I went to the south side, it was like going in the past. I had seen in the Woodlawn community nightly shootings, notable ones, some of them with national attention. But I also was fortunate to see the university working with the city to do the same thing there. They invested some money, public-private partnership. They did a study on 51st Street, and just as I was leaving there to come out here, I was starting to see the first businesses pop up, street lighting, some of the design suggestions that they had about improving the perception of safety. And that ties into what I want to say about when I came out here. I had a perspective when I came out here. I brought my family out here. I'd never been to this community. I love this community. I don't plan on leaving. But I didn't understand. It took me a while to acclimate to crime because what I felt came out of a war zone. I came out and I said, crime's not that bad here. I think the Chronicle even quoted me on that. But now that I've been here for a while, I've noticed other things aside from crime. And this is going to address some of the things that Chief Lowry said. The lack of services. I'm very fortunate that all of my officers are trained as EMT and some of them as paramedics. I'm amazed at some of the work they do. They save lives. But I was going to eliminate that program as a cost-saving measure when I came here until I started seeing my officers save lives. And I see the value in that now. Because of some of the lack of resources that the fire chief talked about, that they're using fire transportation for medical transportation to appointments because we don't have the resources. I know that everyone cares about this and that there's initiatives to address those issues, but going back to what Chief Lowry said, I think we have to address the underlying needs of the community before we address crime, because crime is a symptom of a much larger problem happening in this nation, but also in our community. I'll close by saying that going back to what Joe Mitchell said, I'll close with saying I would ask not to seek to gentrify, but to unify and diversify. And again, I was very impressed by your presentation. I think, based on the experience that they have, I've never met these people in my life, but I think that they have some good ideas, and I think it would be inclusive of everyone in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a very interesting and informative 2 hours. I'd like to now move it over to the council. Okay, we have one more speaker. From the back of the room, last person to speak, I think, unless you'd like to give us another speaker request form, is one of our former aldermen here in DeKalb, Bert Simpson.
Thank you, Your Honor, council, community, guests. My bona fides, I've lived in this town for 30 years now. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with every predecessor you had since 1987 and every predecessor the campus chief had since 1987. And I would like to say for the first time in those years, I'm encouraged by the general attitude that our chiefs of police have about how to appropriately address the matters of crime in our community. That it is not just a policing thing, it is not just a cop on the beat thing. It is trying to interact with the citizens in the local community in ways that Chicago failed my whole boyhood and young adulthood. Also, as part of my bona fides, when I worked at the university, one of my jobs was to punish Greek letter organizations when they broke our rules. So I closed down Sigma Chi, Delta Upsilon, and Lambda Chi Alpha. I also helped revitalize the skulls twice. And I worked with Sigma Chi my first year on that particular job when one of their pledges got killed in an accident on Dresser Road. For 17 years, I was faculty advisor for a group called the Evans Scholars, which, as some of you know now, has closed down. The area you're talking about, I think in Neighborhood 3, when I came here in '87, I don't believe there were any children living there. I don't believe there were any single families living there. It was a lot calmer, a lot more peaceful, a lot less differences of opinion because everybody was pretty much there for the same reason. They were students looking to live and go to school and probably have a good time on the weekends. Now when I drive through there, and I used to drive through there literally twice a day because I would drive by the Evans Scholar House just to keep an eye on it. There are kids everywhere, which in one way is good, but in another way is problematic because I don't think raising small children, my baby's 32 to give you some perspective, I don't believe raising small children in an environment where younger adults are trying to have a good time is necessarily the best mix. So if you're going to fix and this is what troubles me, if you're going to fix the problem with Neighborhood 3, I honestly don't see how you're going to do it. We have landlords who are necessarily interested in their rental property, and they have issues. We have the new families that are in the community that have their issues, and they're real. I don't believe the university is going to be able to move the Greeks from where they are. That's impractical, maybe impossible. So I don't know how you fix that area. That's what troubles me about it. The area needs to be revitalized. It needs to be stabilized. But with all the people who live there and all the different issues, how do you do it? How do you get the landlords to agree? How do you get the Greeks to agree? How do you get the families to agree? How do you get to move a lot of these people out of the way to physically fix the area? Yes, it needs a clinic. Of course it needs a clinic. Yes, it needs a grocery store. Of course it does. It doesn't even have a movie theater. Yes, it has too many liquor stores. Yes, it has more taco places than maybe they need. I just don't know how you fix that area. I know it needs to be fixed. I know it needs to be helped. I honestly just don't know how you do it. So, having said all that, the last thing I want to say is I agree with the gentleman who laid all the studies on the table. In one way, we have lots of studies. You've all seen them. I do understand the value of a new study that may lead us in a different direction. I compliment the City Council for willing to take on this challenge, but we're going to need the help of all the stakeholders, particularly the landlords, particularly the Greeks, and particularly the lower income families who basically have the most to gain from this. It's a Herculean task, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Bert. Ellingsworth Webb. Hello, Ellingsworth.
Hello, Mayor. Ellingsworth Webb, 1226 Pleasant Street. I've lived in DeKalb for 40 years. I came here in '76, graduated from Northern University, stayed here, raised my family here. I have two daughters, one 35, one 30. And I have worked in the community, worked outside of the community. I have assisted in different boards, including Northern Illinois University Alumni Association, where I was vice president. I currently sit on a couple boards currently in town, and I am a property manager. So as I sit here, I attended the Annie Glidden North meeting a week ago, and there were some particular things that I wanted to express, just as also a person that lives here in the community, but also a person who has sat through other speakers before me, and I hear things about jobs, school buses, investment housing, free stuff, two parents, housing stock. All of those are interrelated, and they can be fixed. They can't be fixed with blinders on, meaning that all of us will have to take an opportunity to look at each other and try to solve the problem. I think, and I've spoken to some of the council persons, I think some of it is through a study, some of it is gut-wrenching things that we know need to be fixed. At the rate that we're going, if we don't fix them, things will get worse. There's been a stack of studies, yes, and in most of those studies, the things we've talked about tonight have been identified. Some things that we haven't talked about or was eliminated for studies are part of some of the problems. What we need to work on particularly is a couple of things. For housing stock, I think if a smart landlord wants to change and make money, he'll look at what his stock holders are. Who is his tenant? How can he change his property from what it is now? If it's just student housing, how can he diversify it and make it family living housing, senior housing for the future? We talk about parking. At some point, they're already working on flying cars. We may not be worried need parking space, so let's talk about the future as opposed to being stuck in here in the present. Things will be changing. Free stuff. I don't think anybody wants to be given anything. I think you can establish that people who work for what they get respect what they get, and they will work harder. The 3M jobs cannot be met because people can't get to them. So some of those low-income people have no way of transportation. DeKalb doesn't have any way to get from point A to point B. We need to work on that. That will be probably come out in a study if you did it. 2 parents. There is going to be not everyone having 2 parents. There are people who coexist. There are couples who are gay. They will be 2 males, 2 females. I won't say there'll be a male and a female. We may have single parents. We may have people whose husband who's died who won't have 2 parents. So we can't wait for magical fairy dust to make some of this go away. What I encourage people to do is be open-minded. I sit every month as a commissioner for the City of DeKalb for the Human Relations Commission. I sit on the board for DeKalb Community Gardens. I am the current president of the DeKalb Kishwaukee Kiwanis. I am currently a member and the president of the Youth Service Bureau in DeKalb. So I am seeing all the same kind of conversations happening to a lot of other people that are investing in me to help them change the future. I'm asking for you, the council, to do a couple things. Be honest. Don't take the easy way. Find a way to find the money and fix the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellingsworth. Now, our city council, I would open the floor to any comments regarding the past 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes that we've heard some very interesting material. Alderman Noriko.
I would hope that this study would be seen not simply as an Annie Glidden North study, but as a city study. And as such, that the consultants and city staff also work to bring in stakeholders throughout the city, because it's only as that area succeeds that the rest of the city succeeds, just as it's only as downtown succeeds that the rest of the city succeeds. And we, you know, to echo Ellingsworth's statements, we really need to have a perspective of interconnectedness. And I would also think that as it is seen as a citywide study, that will gain support and involvement for the study. So while the focus is clearly on Annie Glidden North, it really isn't just about Annie Glidden North, because also as some of the issues are addressed in that area, that will hopefully lay some path for addressing those issues in other parts of the city, because it isn't only Annie Glidden North that has issues. Perhaps, you know, some of, for example, the crime and the, you know, medical issues may be more dramatic there, or the numbers may be higher, but it's throughout the city. And what we can do in that area can absolutely carry over to other parts of the city.
Thank you, Kate. Alderman Jacobson.
After sitting through 2.5 hours of comments, some stakeholders included, several that are and aren't, I think it's important living in the neighborhood to share my perspective. Mm-hmm. Obviously, not only is it my ward, but I live on Edgebrook. Edgebrook, just a couple short years ago, was the highest crime rate block in the first ward and in probably our city. It has luckily stabilized somewhat, but still is rather high on that list. I live in a neighborhood that was intentionally designed without services. It was done that way purposely. It was designed to be a transient student neighborhood. That's why they built those apartments. That's why they developed that neighborhood. It was never meant for families. And to claim that adding services into that neighborhood now to fix that problem is only going to further destabilize the student-centric nature of that neighborhood. I mean, I can see that on a daily basis. I live on a block where in the last 5 years of living in my apartment, I've had 6 to 7 confirmed shootings in my backyard. I've had a murder a block over. I've had drug deals going on hourly, if not quarter hourly, in my parking lot. I've had, again, the highest call volume of any other neighborhood, street, block in DeKalb has been in the Edgebrook-Kimberly neighborhood since both I've sat in this chair and Gene has been on our police force. I've had a near riot breakout in front of my apartment where videos that this previous council has seen were shot from my front porch. The neighborhood is on fire. It has become a magnet to metal. The magnet is what we, not only just the city, but the city, the university, and the community have allowed to be created. The metal is poverty. To bring in a study to talk about how we're going to put trees in the neighborhood or paint up the blocks to make them look nice or supplement art in the neighborhood, to paint that magnet isn't going to change the fundamental properties of a magnet and metal. Not even when you separate that magnet metal with substrates does it change those properties. They are what they are. While I appreciate, again, some of the faith-based community and some of the more liberal-minded folks in our community and regularly speak with those people on these issues, again, what I witness every day on my block, children on the streets, 3, 4, 2 years old until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, unwatched by parents. People in the neighborhood pulling guns on each other with children in baby carriages over $10 drug beefs. These aren't people that are looking to make a better life in DeKalb. These aren't people that we should be catering to with services. These are criminals that we want out of our community. And while I appreciate that certainly doesn't cast a wide net on all people of any race or population or demographic financially, poverty leads to crime, period. It's been proven time and time and time and time again since the beginning of time till the end of time. The higher incidents of crime are in more poverty-filled neighborhoods. If the issue is to address the crime in the neighborhood, then you must address that poverty. And while I appreciate that there's multiple different perspectives of how to do so, provide transportation, provide more green space, provide those things, this neighborhood was never intended for those things. There is not a purpose in providing those to the neighborhood because the students won't use them. And this is a directed student-centric neighborhood. The issue that has become in that neighborhood is that the families have moved in, is that the poverty has moved in with them in many cases. That's the issue we need to fix. It's not about beautification. It's not about gentrification. It's not about any of those fun, happy, I wish things. And I appreciate that there's a time and place for that right now. Imagine if you picked up the phone and called the fire department and said, my house is on fire, Eric. I need you here now. It's burning as we speak. And he called and said, well, let's wait a year and we'll tell you how to plant flowers in your neighborhood after it's over. That's what this study right now is proposing. We've had a Greek Row revitalization plan. We've ignored it as a city. We've had multiple community conversations and input and stakeholder meetings through the task force and through the housing study. We've ignored it. We've had all sorts of additional meetings through the Safe and Quality Housing Task Force that met over a year and generally focused on this neighborhood that were effectively ignored. Why? And again, that's not the fault of the existing staff. The issue was we don't have the funds to fix the problem. We're talking $150 to a $250 million problem. We did the same thing with our downtown. We created lots of I wish and I hopes and dreams studies over the years. For the most part, very few of those initiatives were in reality undertaken, again, because of funding, with an operating TIF district that had some level of funding. We don't have that ability on Greek Row, and we know that. We've done that course. The reality is things have to change on the block. Everybody in a community thinks how the taking care of our homeless is an important issue, but nobody wants them on our block. I hear residents coming saying, you know, I bought a house and was so upset when the college kids moved into my backyard a half a mile from campus. But that we should be inclusive and have nice mixed neighborhoods. Again, that's not a reality. This neighborhood was meant for students. As the families have taken over, it has turned the neighborhood into an unsafe place. It's turned the neighborhood into an undesirable place for good, law-abiding, simple, quiet people to live in. As another speaker mentioned, we have three constituencies coexisting in the neighborhood. We do. We have a very small constituency of single-family homeowners. We have the college kids that had this neighborhood to be loud, to express themselves, to live in that transitional phase between childhood and adulthood. That's what this neighborhood was created to do. And now we have an additional constituency of poor families. Again, another park isn't going to fix that problem. Some busing isn't going to fix that problem. A lot of the people in this neighborhood, and again, I live in this neighborhood, I know my neighbors. I reach out and talk to the families. I know many of the families that live on my block. They aren't here generally in the neighborhood because they want to be there. They are there because it's what they can afford. At that same time, as a property owner, and again, it amuses me to a point looking at a third-party consultant coming in and providing pictures in a study, because I can recognize those pictures, two of those pictures, as properties I own on the block. I am an owner on the block. I do own commercial property in the neighborhood. You can't rent it. You can't give it away. So to say, well, what else can we bring here? Can we bring another grocery store? Can we bring those things? In geographic terms, Schnucks is just as far away as any grocery store on Dresser or Twombly would be. It's about a mile and a half. So again, we have all these wonderful ideas how the business world should act. We say, well, landlords need to pick up their properties. You can't rent these units for the amount of money it takes to cover the taxes and to maintain them properly in this community anymore. That's the reality property owners are dealing with. That's the reality Greek property owners specifically are dealing with. When you're looking at major cash infusions that need to be done based on regulatory things, major issues that are minor in terms of neighborhood stability, but major to our code enforcement officers, and putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into buildings you can't rent for over $1 a square foot in residential in this community. Again, well, it's great to hope and dream. I would love rent rates to go up. They're actually going down in the neighborhood in most properties. That's not because the properties have been poorly maintained in some cases. Some of the nicer, newer properties are already, after a year or two of those major renovations, seeing negative declines in rent rates and certainly occupancy rates. And at some point, you have to pay your mortgage. You have to pay the taxes for this community. You have to pay for all those different things. You have to pay for your utilities to keep the site lit and safe. At some point, there is no money left over. It's not that these landlords are driving Ferraris in many cases. Many of our property owners in town, whether they're commercial or residential, especially in this neighborhood, are walking away from the properties and getting rid of them for nothing. They're foreclosing in major properties. Again, it's not because they're driving Ferraris around and laughing at our community. It's because the neighborhood has degraded to such a point that you can't rent in that neighborhood. And our police chief made it very clear what has caused that. And I would agree with Gene completely. Rental property surplus has led to crime, has led to all of the other problems. So then we have the answer. The root cause of the issue is rental property surplus. Is NIU responsible for some of that? Absolutely. Is the city responsible for some of that? Positively. And it is a negative downward spiral that has been allowed to continue in this neighborhood for over a decade, since I've lived there. When we knew problems were coming, we did nothing about them because we couldn't afford them.
Dave, could we allow some other council members time here? Or
Sure.
Okay. Anybody else, or has David spoken for all of us?
I'll
Pat Fagan.
I took the notes here, and there's some good points, and on both sides. I've got arrows going up, going down, going sideways. I see a lot.
They're all over.
I see a lot of the word crime in here, but this is a time to reach out to your alderperson and let them know what you think. What your ideas are. Should we be spending money on consulting for this? Is it the right direction, or is it some other direction we should be going at? Thank you.
Any other comments from City Council? Alderman Fanouken.
David said that a lot of the issue comes from the lack of students who have moved out of that area into the areas more so to the west of Annie Glidden. But again, I'm sorry. Oh, this was off. I'm sorry. That better? All right. Sorry about that. I'll agree with Dave that some of the issues are that not with the student enrollment decline at Northern and the fact that so many students have moved to the west side of Annie Glidden, that's led to a lot of vacancies on that east side of Annie Glidden, on the Hillcrest area north of there. I think just in regards to one remark about possibly the Greeks relocating, I think that was somebody's pipe dream that we'd move that closer to campus, but I don't believe that's going to happen. But with the student enrollment down and the vacancies, the landlords turned to the only resource they had left, which was people who are willing to come into town. And I guess, Dave, you and I agree on some things, we disagree on some things. Since we have those folks there, and this was set up to be a student neighborhood, what do we do to meet the changes that have occurred? What do we do to meet the changing demographics that have already occurred? We have to do something, because if we do nothing, it continues to decline. So, do we just lead things fester, or do we do some of these things that are suggested throughout the plan? Dan Kenny has said several times about it being a food desert out there. We've all heard that it is quite a ways away from a major food store. Follow up with public transportation. I know that as a member of DSATS, I know that we're working there on plans to better incorporate not just that community, but to incorporate the VAC system and the Husky Line system to better cooperate so we can provide better service and get rid of some of the duplication. So I think there are some things already in place that are beginning to happen, but we need to continue to be proactive to take care of the neighborhood there, whether it be the single-family home, the single-parent home, or any of the students that live in that neighborhood, that we need as a council to lead and get some things done.
What I've heard tonight from the audience and from Alderman Jacobson and Alderman Fanouken, Alderman Norrico, and Pat, you suggested that folks reach out to our alderman, are some very passionate folks with some very passionate feelings. I think what I'd like to do now, in closing, I'm going to ask Joellen to say a few things, but are there any comments regarding the proposal that we've seen tonight? That was the purpose, that is the purpose of the Committee of the Whole. Any questions? Yes, Alderman Favor.
So it says, Mr. Heinisch had already pointed out, and I've heard Dave say this repeatedly, if we're going to do this study and we complete the study, let's not put it on the shelf. So before we vote yes at the city council meeting, think about whether you're going to commit to following through if this is the direction we're going to go, because we can't keep funding studies and putting them on the shelf. It does nobody any good. That's my comment.
Thank you. Alderman Verbeek.
I would certainly echo that. As anyone knows me, I'm not a fan of studies. I'm very vocal about that. But what we've heard, and certainly being a near lifelong resident of the city, have seen many, many great plans over the years. There's been many organizations that have gotten together to come up with great ideas, many strategic plans. So I think what hopefully we all keep in mind is that we're talking about people, all right? So I think the way I feel is certainly listening to stakeholders in the 6th Ward. Part of these areas are in the 6th Ward. So I think that we're not going to solve it all tonight. I keep hearing the word fix. I think what I would really like to see is how we could build on the positives in our community rather than be so micro-focused on the negatives. And I did receive an email with consideration about adding a substation, police substation out there where the theater is, the existing old theater. And for me, it's not about more police. It's about how can we reduce the need for police? How can we establish that trust in not just these areas, but throughout the whole city? That component is, I believe, a missing component. I would say directly to the presentation, outstanding comparables. I'm very intrigued by your experience in the whole realm of SSA, Special Service Area. It was brought up, finance, money, we've paid for all these studies. How are we going to fund these initiatives? That, to me, is an important component, because certainly we can get through another study that really offers great guidance. Alderman Favor, great point that we have a stack of these that we haven't been able to take action on. Well, let's figure out how to take action on these in a financial manner, taking in Alderman Jacobson's concerns. We heard about our bond rating dropping last night. We have a number of priorities that are quite extensive to sort through. And certainly I support all of us discussing it further, getting together smaller groups out in neighborhoods, in the 6th Ward, business owners, the comment about Village Commons Bookstore about some California look or whatever. Well, the city doesn't own that property, so there's an owner of that property that would need to be engaged. So for me, we've heard from staff that staff is not prepared to take this on, which I can appreciate. Which is why, in turn, I have to say that even though this is called a study, I agree that it's more of an action plan. And we've sat on our hands too long, folks. It's time to step up.
Alderman Jacobson.
In terms of the study directly, again, I appreciate that there are competencies outside our existing staff. I just think it's too preliminary. We need to do something now. We don't have a year to wait. We don't have 10 to 15 to 20 years to hope things turn around in that neighborhood. There are things we can be doing right this second now, at our very next meeting, that can start to make significant progress toward rectifying some of these issues. Whether it's finalizing the plan for whether or not we're going to provide and/or enforce the sprinkler ordinances in the Greek housing to stabilize that market, which is a very unstable market right now. Talking about density changes and density requirements to limit 10 and 12 and 15 person families from being in 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. There are a host of problems that we know the answers to and that we can have those discussions, and we're not. And I've screamed these from the rooftops for 3, 4, 5+ years, and we haven't done anything about them. I realize we have to do something now, not in a year, not in a year and a half. I had a group come in well before I was alderman, probably 6-7 years ago. And they came in as a consulting group at a significantly lesser cost, promising to provide many of these things and have the Greeks pay for it. That they were going to look at the neighborhood as a whole and start to look at a land use plan and start to look at a residential retail component, again, at a fraction of the cost it's being presented to now. And we sat in the room, and Mr. Kedzior, who was one of our speakers, was in that room with me, which was somewhat amusing. And again, it was a great idea. The last administration at NIU had great ideas. Let's throw millions of dollars at studies and plant some trees and hope the students show back up to say they were doing something about it. We have the opportunity to do things about it now. I appreciate there is a time and a place in the future. Once again, we have the funding lined up. Once again, we have the plan at how the city is going to attempt to move forward that we can do not just with our existing staff, but with our existing council members. And with the data that we already have from the housing study and from the Greek Row revitalization plan, to get to a point in the future, once the fire's put out, that you can start to discuss what the plan of rebuilding the house is. Right now, we need to put out fires. And I just don't think that this study at this point is timely enough, acts on the major issues we're facing now enough, and will be relevant enough to do anything more than, much as many of our other studies, sit on a shelf collecting dust for the next group 8 or 10 years to come by and say, let's spend $150,000 to deal with the problems. Let's do it. Let's get the task force back up. Let's get these stakeholders back in rooms. Let's get the community re-engaged, especially the student community and the Greek communities. Let's do all that. We don't need to pay a penny for that. We have staff to do that. We have the roadmap for that. We've done it before. Let's just do it.
David, you and I are, in many ways, very passionate about what we've done and what we're doing here as a city council. You are the senior city councilman here. You've been around the block in your neighborhood and others, I'm sure, many, many times. You've got a new mayor. But I will say this, we've embarked on a pretty good relationship over 8 weeks. But what I will challenge you, Dave, is to bring some of those. You know, any alderman here can put virtually anything on a city council agenda. Now, having said that, we're going to have to study and see what we need to do so that we have we can have an intelligent conversation among the 7 councilmen and the mayor. So I would challenge you to bring some of those ideas forth. Right now, what we've spent the last 2.5 hours on is the Annie Glidden North revitalization plan. We've seen the proposal from Caneros, and we appreciate your time. Adam and Kim and Jeremy, we appreciate your coming out and giving this to us. Even though I didn't play your game, Adam, you know, I do appreciate what you've done. Unless there are any other comments from council or anybody in the audience, what I'd like to do is turn this back over in conclusion to our Community Development Director, Joellen Charlton. Yeah, Mike, you did this last night to me. You waited till the last minute. Okay, go do it.
I just, getting back to the people component, and we also have complementary things that within our purview that we're currently considering. TIF phase-out, for example. How could we, a two-pronged approach, as a council, consider discussing TIF proceeds to help support workplace training and educational programs, which could be a complementary component or piece to these efforts. So I think we need to keep all matters into consideration. We heard how people coming in from outside the community to fill jobs, and partly because it's transportation, but we have something in our purview, again, going back to the people, that we can have a direct positive impact on.
And Mike, I was just giving you a little
No,
jibe there. Don't take it personally. Joe, did you have a question
Real
or?
quick for Alderman Jacobson, how many properties do you own in areas 1, 2, and 3?
I have one on Greenbrier and one over across Hillcrest, a commercial property. I also manage one, and I also have ties to at least one other business on the block.
So in the areas in question, at least 6 that you have some type of vested interest.
3 to 4.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Joellen, you can close it up here for us tonight.
So Mayor, as
Yes.
Director Charlton is walking back, I just want to address one of the issues I heard several aldermen
Sure.
talk about. First of all, I know different people have used the word study. Really, this is a plan. I think what you've heard from Camaros, the strategies would be put forward as to how do we deal with the issues that are facing the neighborhood. I want to give you an example within my time of serving the city of DeKalb in the past 3.5 years, how we've dealt with a plan that was drafted by the community, that was adopted by this council a little over 1.5 years ago, and that is the 2025 strategic plan. It is not a plan that sits on the shelf. It is a plan that is driving what we do as staff, which is, this is one of the items in the strategic plan that was identified by the community. What we do, for those in the audience that don't know, is we update the council quarterly. So we have staff that their objectives, their goals, their workload is determined by those items that are listed in the strategic plan. We're expected to update, put those items so that we can present that plan to you on a quarterly basis. So if you are concerned about moving forward with the Annie Glidden North revitalization plan and whether it's a plan that's going to sit on the shelf, I'll say to you, we'll create a similar structure to what we're doing with the strategic plan. We can update you quarterly. We can have a certain, committee that oversees this, but it's not going to be a plan that's going to sit on the shelf. It's going to be, if you end up authorizing this and we move forward, those strategies that have been outlined are going to be implemented right away. So it's not going to sit. It's something that we're going to start doing right away. So that's my commitment to you moving forward. It's not something that's going to sit on the shelf. It's something that's going to drive us as staff and dictate what we work on. So keep that in mind as you move forward.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Director
Joellen?
Thank you. I want to make one clarification before I give some closing remarks. I know, Adam, in your presentation, you made one comment about the relocation of Greek Row to another location, and that raised my radar a little bit, and I thought, maybe nobody heard that until I think Kevin brought that up. So I just want to make it very clear, we don't know where this is going to go, but I do want you to know that at least in the year that I've been here, that is not something that we're considering at this present time. I don't want the papers going saying Greek Row is relocating out of the Hillcrest neighborhood. That, again, that's not something that has come up or that's been discussed so far. Moving forward, I want to thank every member of the community that took time out to talk with us over the last week, to come here tonight, because as some of you recall, one of the first things that I said when we began this discussion was that we needed clear definition and consensus on the issues that are out there. And I think what we got tonight from all of the people who came here is that there is a wide range of issues. It's not just one issue from the commercial owner or one issue from the resident. We don't even have one area. So Alderman Jacobson talks about, this area being changed into something it wasn't originally intended to do. That's correct for his portion of the Annie Glidden North corridor. But this study area, and I know we don't have that map up anymore, it's back there facing the audience, goes beyond the Greek Row, Hillcrest area. We have other areas in which we can accommodate some integration and different things to accommodate the mix of uses that can be accommodated in the area. So again, I think we're very fortunate to have heard the needs of many different types of stakeholders and the interest that they would bring to this process. One of the things, and I think we all agree that Gene's comments were very impactful and powerful, but one of the things that he said that I wrote down that has stuck with me is that the bad living situations and a lack of opportunity and jobs cause people to make bad decisions. And one of the things that was outlined early in the study process, because of the crime and because of the number of service calls to this area, is that we needed to identify the issues that would make this area a better place to live. I think Brian Marsh in his comments talked that we didn't need to do this, we needed to have a study on crime. And what I'm suggesting to you is that this really is a study that will address the very nature of crime, because there's a very clear link, and we don't talk about this a lot in land use or planning, but there is a very clear link between how you plan a community and the types of services that are there that address the very specific issues that Gene raised. So when he talks about putting together a plan and addressing the issues that face the members that live in those communities, it really gets to the root of, you know, how are our people living? What kind of living conditions are there? What kind of commercial opportunities are there? How do they get to jobs and become productive in their life? That all starts with land use and planning and zoning. So I really feel very strongly that in order to have that coordinated effort and get out of our silos and police addressing police and fire department addressing their issues, this really does need to become a collective effort. And I am so much more convinced with the people that have taken the time to come to this meeting and express all of those, we will gain that clear consensus so that we have a roadmap. You know, we, Mayor, like you said, we really need to understand how do we best spend our limited resources. And if we don't have a roadmap for that, I feel like we're just going to keep poking away at things and not really have a clear direction. So again, thank you. I'm happy to answer any further questions. And for the community's sake, I think this is going to be on the next agenda for the council's consideration.
Thank you, Jo Ellen. The mission before the city council is very significant. And I echo your comments in thanking all of those who came out tonight. Unless there are any other further questions, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn this committee of the whole. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.